What if I told you there was an NHL goalie who physically couldn't seem to make a normal save? From desperate sprawls to his iconic windmill kicks, Dominik Hašek didn't play like any tendy before him. His highlights aren't just some of the best on YouTube. They're a surreal masterclass in controlled chaos. But how did he develop this unorthodox style that led him to 6 Vezina trophies, 2 Hart Trophies, and a Stanley Cup? And why did he intentionally make saves harder and flashier than they needed to be? Well, to find out, we have to go back to a tiny town in communist Czechoslovakia, where a skinny kid named Dominik first strapped on a pair of oversized pads and changed the game forever. Born in 1965 in Pardubice, Czechoslovakia, Hašek wasn't just another hockey-mad kid. He was different from the start. While most young players dreamed of scoring the game-winning goal, Dominik only wanted to stop it. "I still remember a little bit from when I was 3 or 4 years old," he once said. "I never asked my grandfather or my father to play soccer with me. I always told them, 'This is my net,' which was somewhere at home. It was a door in the kitchen. I gave them a tennis ball and they had a tiny little stick. I'd always say, 'Shoot at me.'" From the very beginning, Hašek wasn't trying to be the one with the puck. Whether it was using shoes, trees, or door frames as posts, if he could create a net, he was in it. And a young Hašek, barely big enough to fill any net, didn't stand out because he had the size of a future NHL goalie, but because he didn't. What he did have was unmatched reflexes, a mind for the game, and some absurd flexibility. At just 14, his coaches even brought him to a doctor who confirmed that his flexibility was not normal. But because it didn't hurt, they let him play. That natural bend gave Hašek a massive edge, allowing him to seal off the lower part of the net in ways no one else could. As he later said, "My butterfly was probably the best in the world, but I was lucky. My knees were just different." At just 16 years old, he debuted in the Czech Extraliga, becoming the youngest player to ever compete in the country's top league. And over the next few years, he quietly dominated behind the Iron Curtain. But there was a catch. He was basically invisible to the NHL. Scouting was difficult in Eastern Europe, and Soviet-aligned nations didn't exactly encourage their stars to flee west. But in 1983, the Chicago Blackhawks took a flyer on him anyway, with the 199th pick in the NHL draft, and they wouldn't see him in North America for nearly a decade. The Czechoslovak Ice Hockey Federation, under tight Soviet influence, blocked players from leaving for North America. It didn't matter how talented you were. If the officials said you were staying, you stayed. So for the beginning of his pro career, Hašek was stuck behind the Iron Curtain, turning away shots in empty rinks for army clubs and local teams, all while NHL scouts drooled over VHS tapes that made him look like a contortionist in goalie pads. When Hašek finally got the green light and made his NHL debut in 1990, most people still hadn't heard of him. By then, he was already in his mid-20s. He didn't speak much English. He had a bizarre, unpredictable style. And in Chicago, he was stuck behind Ed Belfour, one of the league's best at the time. Still, when he got the chance, people couldn't believe what they were watching. Pads in the air where they shouldn't be. Diving glove saves. There was no logic, just raw anticipation and instinct. Coaches didn't understand it, but it worked. In 1992, after his brief 2-season, 25-game stint in Chicago, the Blackhawks made a decision that, in hindsight, might be one of the most generous trades in hockey history. They sent Dominik Hašek to the Sabres for Stefan Beauregard and a 4th-round pick in the 1993 draft. And Buffalo had no idea it had just acquired one of the greatest athletes it would ever see. When Hašek arrived, he was still mostly unknown, a backup tendy with a weird style and barely any NHL experience. But it wouldn't take long before the entire league was asking the same question. Who is this guy? It started slowly, a few starts here and there. Then something clicked. Once Hašek was handed the starting job, he never looked back. Breakaways, cross-crease passes, rebounds, it didn't matter. Hašek read plays like he had seen them 5 seconds in advance. He tossed his limbs around like a gymnast, folding into positions that goalies just weren't supposed to be able to do. But he got there, every time. In Buffalo, with a bit of NHL experience under his belt and his absurd skill finally on full display, Hašek was no longer Dominik, but the Dominator. A nickname that started as a tribute to his highlight reel chaos and quickly became a warning to every shooter in the league. By 1994, he won his first Vezina trophy. In fact, between 1994 and 2001, Dominik Hašek won 6 of them. 6 Vezinas in 8 seasons. That's a damn monopoly. But it didn't stop there. In 1997 and 1998, Hašek did something almost no goaltender in history had done before. He won the Hart Trophy, back-to-back, as league MVP. Think about that. A goalie being more valuable than every goal scorer in the NHL. How nasty do you have to be? Buffalo soon became the house that Hašek built. Without him, they were a bubble team. With him, they were contenders. And in 1999, he dragged them all the way to the Stanley Cup final. They fell short, in one of the most controversial endings in hockey history. But Hašek's legend only grew. He had taken a team with one elite weapon, himself, and nearly pulled off the unthinkable. But the most jaw-dropping moment of his career wouldn't even come in the NHL. It came on the world stage. In 1998, the NHL allowed its players to participate in the Winter Olympics for the first time. The result? A tournament stacked with the filthiest players on earth. Gretzky, Yzerman, Jagr, Lindros, Bure. And then there was Dominik Hašek. Quiet, awkward, wearing his trademark birdcage mask and a XXL chest protector, playing for the Czech Republic, a country not expected to medal. He didn't just show up, he took over. He shut out the United States, stoned Canada in a shootout, and in the gold medal game against Russia, he turned aside everything they had. Final score, 1-0. Czech Republic, gold. That Olympic run made him a national hero, a sports god. In Czechia, Hašek wasn't just an athlete anymore. He was a symbol of pride and resilience. But for all the individual trophies, all the international success, one thing still eluded him: the Stanley Cup. So in 2001, after nearly a decade of carrying the Sabres on his back, Buffalo traded Hašek to the Detroit Red Wings, a powerhouse team with Hall of Famers on every line, and just one missing piece: a true superstar goalie. In Detroit, Hašek didn't have to be perfect every night, but when it mattered most, he was. During the 2001-2002 playoffs, he recorded a record-tying 6 shutouts, including 2 in the Western Conference Final and 1 in the Stanley Cup Final. And on June 13, 2002, after nearly 2 decades of professional hockey, Dominik Hašek finally did it. He won the Cup. He was 37 years old and on top of the world. Most players would walk away, but Hašek wasn't most players. He stepped away from the game for a year, then came back, then retired again, then came back again. At 43 years old, he was back in the NHL, putting up better numbers than goalies half his age. He wasn't just still playing, he was still winning, helping the Red Wings to another cup in 2008, this time as part of a tandem, but still holding his own in the playoffs. By the time he really retired in 2011, Hašek had played pro hockey in 4 different decades. He had won everything there was to win: Olympic gold, World Championships, Vezinas, Harts, and a Stanley Cup. But maybe more importantly, he never stopped playing the way he wanted to. No goalie in history looked like Dominik Hašek. No one ever will. Because Hašek didn't just bend the rules of goaltending, he broke them. And in the chaos he created, he found something extraordinary: a new way to stop the puck, a new way to win, and a legacy that no goalie, no matter how conventional, will ever match.